Eleanor Parker spent 50 years hiding how she really felt about the sound of music. Behind her elegant smile as the Baroness, she was furious. After shooting one scene 23 times, she locked herself in her trailer. When they cut her character's backstory, she cried. But the worst betrayal was yet to come. Today, her personal diaries finally reveal the dark truth about one of Hollywood's most beloved films. Eleanor Parker was born on June 26, 1922, in Cedarville, Ohio. Her father, Lester Day Parker, was a math teacher who taught in a way that made learning exciting and real. Eleanor grew up in a small house on Elm Street with her two older siblings. They often played math games, and this helped Eleanor learn how to think quickly and solve problems. Right outside her bedroom window, she could see the local community theater. She would watch people rehearse and perform from her room. She didn't know it then, but this would spark her love for acting. On the day Eleanor was born, a lightning storm hit the town, and a bolt struck the town hall clock, stopping it at the exact time of her birth. People started calling her Cedarville's lightning rod and said she was meant for something big. Eleanor's first acting role came when she was 7. Her school was doing a play called The Enchanted Forest, and she played a talking tree. On opening night, the lead actress got sick, so Eleanor stepped in. She learned the whole role in 2 hours and gave an amazing performance. From then on, she wanted to act all the time. She joined every play at her school and even worked behind the scenes when she wasn't on stage. By the time she finished high school, she had acted in 37 plays. Once, she practiced so much that she got sick and ended up in the hospital. But that didn't stop her. Her teacher, Mrs. Thornton, noticed her talent and helped her become even better. Mrs. Thornton also taught her how to study characters in a unique way, almost like solving a math problem. Eleanor would later use this to stand out as an actress. At 17, Eleanor decided to leave her small town and go to California to follow her dream. She had only $87 and a small suitcase. She took a bus, but the trip was tough. The bus broke down 3 times, and she had to work at a diner for a couple of days in Oklahoma to pay for the rest of the trip. When she finally arrived in Los Angeles, it was during a big heat wave, but she didn't let that stop her. She went straight to the Pasadena Playhouse, a famous acting school, but auditions had already ended. Eleanor refused to give up. She stayed outside the theater for 3 days, performing monologues for anyone who passed by. One night, the founder of the Playhouse heard her performing and gave her a chance. He was so impressed that he let her join the school for free, something he had never done before. Eleanor worked hard at the Playhouse, acting in 73 plays in just 18 months. She often performed in more than one play on the same day. This helped her become a versatile actress. Her big break came on her 19th birthday. After a performance as Ophelia in Hamlet, a talent scout from Warner Brothers offered her a screen test. Eleanor asked to finish her studies first, and a year later, she went for the test. Instead of using the script they gave her, she made up her own speech. Everyone on set was amazed, and the head of Warner Brothers, Jack Warner, was so impressed that he gave her a 7-year contract on the spot. This was a big deal, especially because she negotiated a higher starting pay and the right to turn down roles she didn't like. She signed the contract with red lipstick, which became her lucky habit. Her first film role was supposed to be in They Died with Their Boots On, but her scenes were cut. She didn't let this bother her. Her next movie was Buses Roar, a low-budget thriller. She played a ticket agent and had to wear the same outfit for the entire movie because they didn't have enough money for costumes. In one scene, a real tarantula crawled on her arm, but she stayed in character even though she was scared of spiders. The director was so impressed that he gave her more screen time. The movie wasn't a huge hit, but critics loved Eleanor's performance. Over the next year and a half, she acted in 15 films. She worked long hours and kept improving her craft. During this time, she started using the acting technique she had learned from Mrs. Thornton, which helped her stand out and catch the attention of Hollywood's best directors. Eleanor Parker's rise to fame started with her role in Pride of the Marines in 1945. She played Ruth Hartley, the fiancée of Al Schmid, a Marine who lost his sight in World War II. Eleanor was only 23, but showed incredible maturity and depth in the role. The movie came out just days after Japan surrendered, and it struck a chord with audiences still recovering from the war. One scene stood out, where Ruth visits Al in the hospital. She hides her shock and stays supportive, showing strength and love. Critics loved her performance, calling it tender and powerful. The movie was a big success and made Eleanor a star. Her pay at Warner Bros. Jumped from $500 to $3,000 a week, and the movie earned over $3 million, a huge amount back then. Eleanor later said this was the role that changed her life. After this success, things got frustrating for Eleanor. She was often cast in roles where she played the good girl. These characters were sweet and kind, but they didn't let her show what she could really do. From 1945 to 1949, she appeared in movies like Never Say Goodbye and Voice of the Turtle. She wanted something more challenging. In an interview, she said she was tired of playing roles that didn't feel real or important. She even turned down some parts because they weren't good enough. This made Warner Brothers angry, and they suspended her twice. In 1 year alone, she lost 6 months of work and $100,000 in pay. But Eleanor didn't give in. She wanted to prove she could do more. In 1946, she took a big risk by starring in Of Human Bondage, hoping to show her range. The story had already made Bette Davis a star, and Eleanor wanted to follow in her footsteps, but the production was messy. The director wasn't sure she could handle the role, and she had to fight to be cast. She even changed her look, capping her teeth and learning a Cockney accent. The movie had a terrible preview, and Warner Brothers shelved it for 2 years. When it finally came out, critics didn't love it. Many compared her to Bette Davis and said she wasn't as good. The failure was tough for Eleanor, but she said it taught her valuable lessons about acting. In 1949, Eleanor heard about a movie called Caged, a gritty story about life in a women's prison. She thought it was perfect to show her acting skills, but the producers didn't think she was tough enough for the role. Eleanor worked hard to change their minds. She cut her hair short, wore no makeup, and dressed in plain clothes for her screen test. She even visited real women's prisons to see how inmates lived. The studio finally gave her the role, and when the movie came out in 1950, her performance was unforgettable. The movie shocked audiences with how real and raw it felt. Parker showed how Marie changed from a scared, naive 19-year-old into a tough, broken convict. One of the most unforgettable scenes was when Marie was beaten badly and her head was shaved. Parker insisted on doing that scene herself instead of using a stand-in. The movie also dealt with big issues like corruption and same-sex relationships in prisons, which was very bold for its time. It came out on May 19, 1950, and was praised by critics. Parker's nomination was announced on February 13, 1951, when she was just 28, making her the youngest nominee in her category that year. Even though she didn't win, her role in Caged became one of the most talked-about performances in film history. The movie was so powerful it even helped change how women's prisons were run in the United States. Just 1 year later, Parker got her second Oscar nomination for Detective Story. This movie, released in 1951, followed a single day in a busy New York police station. Parker played Mary McLeod, a woman with a painful secret that could ruin her marriage to a tough detective played by Kirk Douglas. Parker almost turned the role down because she was too tired from her last film. The director, William Wyler, begged her to take it and promised to shoot all her scenes in just 2 weeks. Parker worked long hours, sometimes 18-hour days, to finish on time. The hard work paid off, as her performance was full of raw emotion. One of the most daring parts of the movie was a scene where Mary revealed she had an abortion in the past. At that time, no one talked about abortion in movies, and the film's producers wanted to cut the scene. But Wyler and Parker fought to keep it, saying it was important to the story. They won, and the scene stayed in the movie. Parker's nomination was announced on February 11, 1952, making her one of the few actors to get Oscar nods 2 years in a row. She didn't win that year either, but her role in Detective Story is still studied by actors today. Parker's third Oscar nomination came in 1955 for the film Interrupted Melody. She played Marjorie Lawrence, an opera singer from Australia who became famous but had her career nearly destroyed by polio. The movie told the story of Lawrence's fight to keep going after her illness. Parker's dedication to the role was incredible. She spent 6 months practicing how to lip-sync opera songs in French, German, and Italian. She also worked hard to copy Lawrence's Australian accent perfectly. For the scenes where her character needed to use an iron lung, Parker insisted on using a real 30-pound iron lung instead of a lightweight prop. In one very emotional scene, Parker performed a famous opera song, Un bel dì, vedremo, while sitting in a wheelchair with her body strapped in place. Marjorie Lawrence herself saw the movie and said Parker's acting felt completely real. The movie came out on May 5, 1955, and Parker's nomination was announced on February 18, 1956. Even though she lost the award, many critics say her performance in Interrupted Melody was her best. Years later, people were shocked to learn that Parker had actually sung all the opera songs during filming. Usually, actors lip-synced while someone else sang, but Parker wanted her performance to feel as real as possible. She spent months practicing alone in a cabin, singing the songs every day for hours. Her singing wasn't used in the final movie because it was recorded by a professional opera singer. However, there is one scene in the movie where Parker's real voice can be heard, and it makes the character's struggle feel even more real. When this fact came out many years later, people began to see just how much effort Parker put into her work. Some even said she should have won the Oscar for Interrupted Melody. Eleanor Parker's journey to playing the Baroness in The Sound of Music was not easy. In October 1963, her agent told her about the role. Parker was unsure about it. She thought she might be too young to play a rich widow who wanted to marry Captain Von Trapp. She was worried that taking this role could make people see her as someone suited only for older characters. This had already happened to her in a movie called Madison Avenue. She spent weeks thinking about it, reading the script again and again. She even listened to the Broadway soundtrack over and over. Still, she couldn't decide. On November 3rd, Robert Wise, the director, called her. He explained why this role was important. He told her the Baroness was not just a villain, but a key part of the story. He also said he had considered 37 other actresses for the role, but she was his first choice. This call and the offer of $100,000 finally made her start thinking seriously about accepting the role. Parker had other worries. She didn't want children watching the movie to hate her for being the woman who got in the way of Maria and Captain Von Trapp. She met with the screenwriter, Ernest Lehman, in November to talk about this. He told her the character was not meant to be a bad person. He explained that 2 songs meant for the Baroness had been removed, which she thought made her character less interesting. To help, they worked on adding small details to make the Baroness feel real and human. They gave her a backstory. She had lost her first husband in the war, which made her afraid to love again. Parker also suggested adding moments where the Baroness showed kindness to the Von Trapp children. They even created the ball-throwing scene because of this. She took this so seriously that she talked to a child psychologist in December to see how young viewers might feel about her character. Even after agreeing to take the role, Parker made sure she got the credit she deserved. Her agent fought for her to be listed second, right after Julie Andrews. The studio refused because Christopher Plummer was already promised that spot. After weeks of arguing, they agreed that Parker would get third billing, but her name would appear on its own in the credits. It would say, "And Eleanor Parker as the Baroness." She also made sure she would have at least 30 minutes of screen time. This led to the studio adding and extending some of her scenes. Parker also had control over her photos and a rule that they could not cut more than 25% of her scenes without her approval. Parker and Plummer had to do screen tests to see how they worked together. Their chemistry was clear right away. They improvised lines in one scene, and the director liked it so much he added it to the script. They also did a ballroom scene in one perfect take, which got applause from the crew. There were some challenges too. Plummer came to one test drunk, but Parker handled it well. They had a bit of history since they briefly dated years earlier. This helped make their scenes feel natural. Parker finally decided to take the role on March 3, 1964. She met with Robert Wise and Julie Andrews for dinner. Andrews told her about her own doubts before doing Mary Poppins, which made Parker feel better. Wise also told her the studio had increased the budget for the film, showing how much they believed in it. Parker was excited about filming in Austria for 8 weeks, but she still had conditions. She wanted to approve her costumes. She asked for 15 custom outfits, all very expensive. She also wanted to keep all the jewelry her character wore, including a diamond necklace worth a lot of money. When all her demands were met, she signed the contract that night. This decision made her part of one of the most loved movies of all time. Eleanor Parker's time on The Sound of Music was not as cheerful as the film looked. She had constant arguments with the director, Robert Wise, about how her character, the Baroness, should be portrayed. Parker believed the Baroness needed more depth and complexity, but Wise wanted a simpler character to make Maria stand out more. During the party scene, Parker worked hard to show the Baroness's internal struggles, but Wise wasn't happy. He made her redo a single reaction shot 23 times, which delayed filming by hours. Things got worse when Wise changed her dialogue without asking. Parker felt insulted and stayed in her trailer for 2 hours before Christopher Plummer talked her into coming back. By the time filming ended, Parker and Wise barely spoke, and later, she found that many of her scenes had been cut. She called working with Wise challenging but rewarding. But everyone knew how hard it had been. Another big disappointment for Parker was the decision to remove the song "How Can Love Survive" from the film. This song would have shown the Baroness's sharp wit and given her more personality. Parker spent weeks practicing it with a vocal coach and had a beautiful silver gown made just for the scene. 2 days before filming the song, Wise and producer Saul Chaplin told her it was being cut because it didn't fit the family-friendly tone of the movie. Parker was devastated and argued for hours, but they wouldn't change their minds. Parker didn't think The Sound of Music would be successful. She thought the story was too sweet and old-fashioned for audiences in the 1960s. She worried about the long run time and whether people would sit through a 3-hour musical. Even after a test screening where the audience cheered, she wasn't convinced. She feared her character would be remembered as the woman who tried to stop Maria from singing. Despite her worries, the film went on to become a massive success, winning 5 Academy Awards and becoming one of the most beloved musicals of all time. Eleanor Parker was unhappy with how her role in The Sound of Music turned out, but she never told anyone for more than 50 years. In her journal on September 12, 1965, a few months after the film came out, she wrote about how disappointed she felt. She said so much of the depth she gave to the Baroness was gone. One scene she missed most was where the Baroness shared her lonely childhood and fear of losing Georg with Max. It was filmed on April 18, 1964, and took 17 takes. She cried after filming because she felt it was some of her best work. Another scene, filmed on May 2, 1964, showed the Baroness trying to connect with the Von Trapp children. Parker prepared for weeks for this moment, studying real-life stepmothers to get it right. Losing these scenes made her feel like an important part of the character was erased. She even wrote a letter to the director, Robert Wise, in November 1965, but never sent it. In the letter, she said the Baroness had been turned into a flat character with no depth. She listed specific edits that made her feel this way. Even though she was upset, Parker praised the movie in public, always smiling in interviews. She kept her sadness private for decades, but it affected her career choices and eventually led to her stepping back from acting in the 1970s. Parker was also upset about how the Baroness was made to look like a villain. In a private conversation with her friend Agnes Moorehead in 1966, she said it felt like the filmmakers had forgotten Elsa was also a woman who lost someone she loved. In the stage play, the Baroness was shown as a widow, but this detail was left out of the movie. Parker worked hard to create a deep backstory for the character. She wrote a long biography of Elsa's life, from her childhood in Vienna to her struggles with infertility, but none of this was used in the movie. One scene, filmed on March 3, 1964, showed the Baroness opening up to Maria about her fear of being alone. Parker had put her own feelings of loneliness into the performance and thought it was one of her best. When the scene was cut, she felt betrayed. In her diary, on August 7, 1965, she wrote about how the Baroness had been reduced to just an obstacle in Maria and Georg's love story. She felt Elsa's struggles for love and belonging were ignored. Parker was also frustrated that more than a third of her screen time was cut, including 3 key scenes she thought were important to show Elsa's motivations. Between 1967 and 1969, she recorded her thoughts on audio tapes, hoping to one day write a memoir. On one tape, she said she had filmed 18 minutes of scenes showing Elsa's complexity, but all of them were cut. She felt the role had potential to explore deeper themes about love and loyalty, but was flattened into something simple. This frustration stayed with her for the rest of her life. On December 15, 1965, she wrote about an interview where she had to smile and say everything was wonderful, even though she felt like screaming. Her agent also told her to stay positive because her career depended on it. Parker didn't want to ruin the magic of the movie for others, so she stayed silent. She also kept quiet around her co-stars. She wrote about having dinner with Julie Andrews and how Julie's happiness made her feel like a fraud for hiding her own feelings. After The Sound of Music became a huge success in 1965, Eleanor Parker's career took an unexpected turn. Even though she was famous for her talent and had been nominated for 3 Oscars, Hollywood seemed to forget about her. She became typecast as the Baroness, and it became hard for her to find meaningful roles. This was very different from her earlier years when she was known for playing a wide range of characters, earning her the nickname the Woman of 1,000 Faces. Between 1966 and 1969, she only appeared in 3 films, much fewer than before. Most of these roles were in smaller movies that didn't let her show her real abilities. One example was An American Dream in 1966, which was based on a famous novel but was poorly received. It didn't do well with critics or audiences, which hurt her reputation even more. She also missed out on roles that could have been career-changing. In 1967, she wanted to play Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate, but the part went to Anne Bancroft instead. This was especially painful because the movie became a massive hit and revived Bancroft's career. In a 1988 interview, Parker admitted this time was very difficult for her, saying, "It felt like Hollywood forgot who I was and what I could do." When film roles became rare, Parker decided to focus on television in the late 1960s and 1970s. At the time, many actors saw TV as a step down from movies, but Parker didn't let that stop her. She approached it with professionalism and determination. She had already appeared on TV in 1960 in a variety show called Star Time, but her big push into television came after The Sound of Music. In 1969, she got her first regular TV role on Bracken's World, a show about the behind-the-scenes world of a Hollywood studio. She played Sylvia Caldwell, the studio's owner. The role seemed perfect for her, but the show didn't do well in the ratings. After one season, Parker left because of disagreements with the producers. Even though that show didn't last, Parker kept working in TV through the 1970s. She appeared in popular series like Hawaii Five-0, The Love Boat, and Fantasy Island. These shows gave her a chance to play different kinds of characters, from serious to funny. One of her most memorable TV roles came in 1975 in a Christmas-themed thriller called Home for the Holidays. She played the mother of a family that was being terrorized during the holiday season. The movie also starred Sally Field and became a cult favorite that people still watch during Christmas. Although Parker became known for her television work later, her most acclaimed performance on TV actually came in 1963, before The Sound of Music. She starred in an episode of The 11th Hour, a drama about mental health. In the episode, she played a woman struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts. Her performance was raw and emotional, earning her an Emmy nomination. To prepare for the role, Parker visited psychiatric hospitals and spoke to doctors to understand the struggles of people dealing with mental illness. Critics praised her for how real and moving her performance was, and the Emmy nomination validated her ability to succeed in television as well as film. Parker's last big movie was Sunburn in 1979, a comedy thriller set in Acapulco. She played a wealthy socialite caught up in an insurance fraud scheme. The movie also starred Farrah Fawcett, but wasn't very successful. It got mixed reviews and didn't make much money at the box office. For Parker, this role marked the end of her film career, which had once been filled with critically acclaimed parts. After Sunburn, she decided to step away from Hollywood. By the early 1980s, Parker started to act less and less. Her last role was in a 1991 TV movie called Dead on the Money. After that, she retired completely at the age of 69. She was known for being private and didn't enjoy the Hollywood spotlight. She refused to write a memoir or allow a biography, saying she preferred to let her work speak for itself. She spent her later years in Palm Springs, focusing on her family and enjoying a quiet life. She rarely appeared in public, and even skipped a 30th anniversary reunion for The Sound of Music in 1995, disappointing fans. Her last public appearance was in 1999 at a screening of her film Caged. After that, she stayed completely out of the public eye. Eleanor Parker passed away on December 9, 2013, at the age of 91. Her death marked the end of a remarkable career, and fans remembered her for her incredible talent and grace.